After he made his first prolonged public appearance since being discharged from hospital in March after suffering a serious bout of double pneumonia. His medical team had said his condition had stabilized, allowing him to continue his recovery at his Vatican residence. Mourning rites will last 9 days, with the date of the funeral and burial to be decided by selected cardinals. Pope Francis's body could be moved to St. Peter's Basilica, allowing the faithful to pay their respects as early as Wednesday, according to a Vatican spokesperson. Pope Francis had indicated that, unlike many of his predecessors, he will be buried at the ancient Basilica of St. Mary Major. He spent nearly 12 years as the Roman Catholic Church leader. Around the world, people have expressed shock and sorrow following his death, with many praising his humility and legacy. Let's get more on this. John Bever joins us live from Rome with more. John, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. John, Pope Francis's death comes just a day after he delighted the faithful with a surprise appearance at St. Peter's Square. His passing has come as a shock to many. Could you walk us through what the day has been like so far?
Yeah, I would say it's a very somber mood here in Rome. As you mentioned, the announcement of his death was made this morning. It was just after 7:30 local time. And again, as you mentioned, it came as a shock, especially because he gave that address yesterday to the faithful who'd gathered for Easter. So, of course, he'd been incredibly unwell earlier this year in hospital for more than a month, but had returned to the Vatican. So there was some hope, despite looking very frail and unwell yesterday. There was, of course, hope about his health going forward. But of course, yes, the announcement this morning that he had died has been greeted with shock and sadness here in Rome, in the Vatican City, and as you mentioned, around the world as well. Somewhere in the region of 1.4 billion Catholics saw the Pope as their spiritual guide, the person they looked to when it came to religious matters. So that, of course, is a very sad moment for them. For Rome and for the Vatican City, they now have the very complicated, very difficult task of laying the Pope to rest. That, of course, has a great deal of meaning for people, as mentioned, but of course is a big security operation as well. This is the Basilica behind me where the Pope will be laid to rest, and that is a break from tradition, as you mentioned. So the Pope, very much seen as being a pioneer in life, is a pioneer in death as well. He has simplified the whole process when it comes to his mourning, his passing. So all of these things we're going to be hearing more about in the coming days, but we are expecting Catholic members of the Catholic community to come flooding into Rome, to come flooding into Vatican City to pay their respects over the coming days.
Well, John, let's pick up on that. What happens now after his death, and what can we expect to happen in Rome in the coming days? You did touch on that in your earlier answer.
Yeah, so what we are going to see is a simplified version of the incredibly detailed, complex and historic process when it comes to laying a Pope to rest. The Pope was someone who turned away from many of the finer offerings that were available to him as head of the Catholic Church. He preferred to live more simply, and it seems that he will be continuing that in death as well. So the whole process of him being laid to rest will be simplified. As I mentioned before, he will be laid to rest here rather than in Vatican City itself. That's a break from tradition. So for members of the Catholic community, there will be a lot of changes when it comes to the death of this Pope compared to previous popes. But that sense of loss remains, of course, for all of them. And as I mentioned, we are expecting to see many people arriving here in Rome and at Vatican City as well over the coming days, all coming to pay their respects to the first Pope who came from the Southern Hemisphere. Of course, Pope Francis had Italian parents but came from Argentina. So there's interest about whether the next Pope, whether that will be continued, whether we will see another Pope from the Southern Hemisphere, or whether we return to the more traditional approach of appointing a pope who is European and possibly Italian. All of that, though, to be decided once the proper mourning period has been seen out for Pope Francis, who died this morning here in Rome.
Well, once again, Pope Francis dies at 88 after 12 years as head of the Roman Catholic Church. John Bevere in Rome, thanks for that. African leaders have paid tribute to Pope Francis's remarkable legacy, calling it one of compassion and commitment to inclusivity. DRC President Felix Tshisekedi hailed the pontiff for his unwavering commitment to peace. Other leaders who paid their respects to the Pope include Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Kenyan President William Ruto, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, among others. Tributes have also been pouring in from around the world following the confirmation of Pope Francis's death. Several world leaders have remembered him as a man of deep faith and boundless compassion. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the Pope was a great apostle of mercy in whom he saw the answer to the challenges of the modern world. Germany's incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz said the pontiff was someone who would be remembered for his tireless commitment to society's weakest members. And U.S. President Donald Trump and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni also honored the Pope. CGTN's Ray Addison looks back at the life of Pope Francis. Let's take a look.
In March 2013, white smoke from the Sistine Chapel signalled the Cardinal's choice in the election of a new Pope. Crowds gathered in St. Peter's Square to hear the news. The result? The appointment of the first pontiff from the Americas, a man who believed in working alongside people, who called himself Francis after Francis of Assisi, a friend of the poor. There were doubters within the Vatican that this moderate was a wise choice, but they were outnumbered. Before his elevation to the Vatican, Jorge Mario Bergoglio had been a humble archbishop in Buenos Aires, a quiet academic who took the bus to work. His appointment was a clear reflection that today 2/3 of the world's 1.3 billion Catholics live in the Southern Hemisphere, a vast proportion in South America. Pope Francis was always bound to bring a shift in culture to the papacy. He turned down the Vatican staterooms to live in a small apartment. He was more visible, taking frequent opportunities to make close contact with the Catholic community. Francis used the power of the Vatican in international politics, summoning Lebanese religious leaders to encourage Middle East peace talks, brokering US relations with Cuba, embracing the politics of climate change, and calling for an end to conflicts, including the attack on Ukraine and a ceasefire in Gaza. But he was resolute on two issues. He ruled out the possibility of women becoming bishops and any support for same-sex marriage, although he did take a softer tone towards the LGBTQ community than his predecessors, urging churches to welcome members and saying homosexuality was not a crime.
If a person with homosexual tendencies is a believer and seeks God, who am I to judge?
For some, Francis was not the liberal that progressive sections of the Catholic Church had hoped for, but more perhaps a reflection of Latin American culture. However, he remained a man of the people. In later years, as his health started to fail, Francis would not be separated from his followers, taking to his hospital balcony to conduct prayers. Even when using a wheelchair, Pope Francis continued to travel, spending precious time with the Catholic faithful. As a priest, Francis had always believed the Church's place was with the people, sharing the same streets and lives. One of his quotes reads, "We must be poor among the poor. We need to include the excluded and preach peace." Ray Addison, CGTN.